welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlene and today I'm going to be sharing with you my December and winter TBRs. It feels really weird to be saying we're already going into December. It does not feel like this year should be over yet. So normally each month I like to go over the books that I'm planning to read for the next month, but this time I kind of want to look at books that I want to read over the entire winter season. So mostly December, January, February, and a bit into March. March is kind of one of those weird months where a lot of times it still feels wintry, but we start to dip into spring. So I don't really know what to ever expect from March. So some of the winter reading ideas may spill over into March. They may spill far into March. They may spill only a little bit into March. It just depends on what winter into spring looks like next year. But there are certain books that, to me, seem to fit certain seasons better than others. And so I want to try to prioritize some of those books throughout the season while still having certain books that I pick for a particular month. So December especially is the month when I like to read primarily Christmas books. So I might get to some of these winter books, but more than likely they will wait until January. But some of them may start in the latter part of December, especially once Christmas is over. So we will just see. The first thing I want to talk about are all of the books that are more Christmassy that I'm wanting to read in the month of December. And the first one is Hogfather by Terry Pratchett. And this is the book that I am picking for my In Real Life book club with my brother and sister-in-law. We have been reading through the Terry Pratchett books throughout the year in the Death series. And Hogfather is the fourth one, but the whole point in reading through all of these books has been leading up to Hogfather. Because my sister-in-law wanted to pick it last year, but then realizing none of us had read any of the other books in the Death series, she was like, "You're not really going to understand Hogfather if you haven't read the books before it, or at least some of the books before it." So we decided to work through the Death series throughout the rest of the year, and then in December we're going to read Hogfather. So I don't know much about this other than I'm pretty sure there's a Santa Claus character in it. Beyond that, I really know nothing, but it's Terry Pratchett, it's Discworld. I'm sure it'll be a fun time. All right, the next one is one that I need to finish, and I've been waiting to work on it until December because it's Midwinter Murder by Agatha Christie. And no, December is not midwinter. January, early February is midwinter. Until late December, it's not even winter yet. But I did want to work on this book in the cooler months, and I should probably explain. This is a short story collection, and I started reading it last year. And honestly, I read one novella, which is called Three Blind Mice. And I think I read two of the short stories. The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding by Hercule Poirot I'd already read before. So at the end of last year, I only had 4 stories done. And I think there's 12, 13, 14 stories in this collection. However, in the course of this year, with reading some Parker Pyne mysteries and some Harley Quinn mysteries, I ended up reading through all but 4 of the short stories in this collection. So I figure I should be able to get through the other 4, no problem. But I'm still wanting to get through as many of the books I already have in progress as I can by the end of the year. And this was the one I was saving for December. And I don't remember offhand which short stories I still need to read, but I do know I have 4 left. Then the next book is a sequel to one I read last December, and that is Ghosts of Greenglass House by Kate Milford. And from what I understand of this book, it has a very similar premise to Greenglass House. It's set during the winter holidays. It is a fantasy. A family owns an inn, and all of these strange people show up, but it's a fictional town, fictional world. And there ends up being a mystery that comes up while the guests are there. Some things start going missing. Nobody knows why. And there's also an old mystery tied to the house itself. And so it sounds like in the second book, we're going to have more people showing up who are kind of mysterious or suspicious, and we'll probably have another mystery. So I did really enjoy Greenglass House last year. And I also read the companion novel called The Raconteur's Commonplace Book, which in Greenglass House, the main character is given the Raconteur's Commonplace Book. And then the author eventually published the book of the same title that's supposed to be the book that the boy read. So I read through that one last year, and I actually enjoyed that one even more than Green Glass House. From what I understand, Green Glass House and Ghosts of Green Glass House are like her lightest books. Her other books have more of a darker tone to them, and that's probably why I enjoyed Raconteur's Commonplace book more, because it does have a little bit darker tone. But I did still enjoy Green Glass House, and I'm looking forward to jumping into the next book. Then the next book that I'm hoping to read is Last Christmas in Paris by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. And I feel like I've heard a fair amount of people talk about liking the books written by this author duo. I have never read any of their books, so I don't know how I'm going to feel about this one, but it does sound like it should be a really good book. So from what I understand, it begins in 1914 during World War I. And we follow Annie and Thomas over 4 years, going through the war and all of that, and they write letters to each other. Then in 1968, Thomas returns to Paris alone to lay the ghosts of his past to rest, but then finds one final letter in Paris. That's all I know about it. My guess is it probably starts in 1968 and we get flashbacks to the other 4 years, but that's really all I know about the book. However, I have read almost nothing that has to do with World War I. So the fact that it's set during that war and not World War II has me really intrigued. And then the last book I'm planning to pick up that is specifically a Christmas book is Christmas Joy by Nancy Nagel. Now, I will be honest, I had never heard of this book before, but Jess from Pages and Grace mentioned this on her Instagram as being her favorite secular Christmas book. And lo and behold, when I went to my library the next time, they have a library book sale that is constantly ongoing, and this book was on the shelf. So of course I picked it up. I don't really know anything about it, but the top of it says, a heartwarming Christmas story about family, friendship, and finding love in unexpected places. However, Jess said that she really liked this book, so I'm willing to give it a try, regardless of the fact that I know nothing about it. Alright, so those are all of the books I'm planning to read specifically in the month of December for Christmas. I don't know for sure if I'll get to all of them. I'm going to try, because I do really want to read all of them. But those are the ones that I'm going to prioritize this year. Then I have a whole bunch of other books that, for the most part, are going to be the ones that I'm going to be picking from as I'm reading through the winter. So there will be some books that end up on my TBR because they are book club books or they're part of a reading challenge. But there will be other books that I will want to read specifically to mood read. And these are the main books that I'm going to be choosing from. It's possible that another one or two could squeeze their way in, but these are the ones that I want to prioritize during the winter months. So will I get to all of these? Absolutely not. Part of me wants to say I hope so, or maybe, but let's be realistic. I'm probably not getting to all of these. These are just the books that I really want to prioritize for the winter season. The first book on the list is part of a series that I really want to continue, but it's also a bigger book, which is why I haven't picked it up. But I do tend to like to read bigger books in the winter because I feel like I have more time to just sit and relax and enjoy a longer book. So that's why it's on the list. And that is The Viscount of Bragelonne, or The Vicomte de Bragelonne, even though my French is atrocious. And this is the third book in the D'Artagnan Romances series, the first book being The Three Musketeers, which is the one most people are familiar with. Now, the last book in this series is The Man in the Iron Mask, which is the other one most people are familiar with. But this is the third one, and I loved The Three Musketeers. Now, 20 Years After was a little all over the place. I enjoyed the first quarter. I was kind of bored in the second quarter, and I loved the last half of the book. So this one sounds like it should be really good. I'll just read what the back says, at least as much as I feel like I can without giving spoilers away. So it says, it is May 1660, and the fate of nations is at stake. Mazarin plots, Louis XIV is in love, and Roel de Bragelonne, son of, not saying that, is intent on serving France and winning the heart of Louis de la... I'm not saying that name. I will put it up somewhere on the screen because, no, I will butcher that one. I don't know how to pronounce her name. D'Artagnan, meanwhile, is perplexed by a mysterious stranger, and soon he learns that his old comrades already have great projects in hand. And I'm not going to read what their projects are because I don't want to potentially get into spoilers. Honestly, I love these four friends. Porthos cracks me up. I love Athos's love and compassion for his friends. I love D'Artagnan's wit. Aramis is an interesting character at times. So yeah, I just love when the four of them are working together, which is why I enjoyed the second half of 20 Years After so much more than the first half, because we finally have times where either we have 2 and 2 or we have all four of the friends together. And it's just so much fun when you bring the four of them together. So very much looking forward to continuing this series. And that is a pretty high priority, but that it's also a bigger book. I guess I didn't look up the page count, did I? Let's see if I can find the end of the book because there's so many endnotes. This one is 658 pages long. So it will take a while to get through. All right, the next one is also a little bit bigger book, but it will also finish out a series, and that is The Storm of Echoes by Christelle Debeau. Now, I will be honest, this is one of the books I was really hoping to get to in the fall. Unfortunately, a lot of other books ended up taking precedence, so that didn't happen. I feel like the pink cover doesn't really scream winter. It might scream February, but it really doesn't scream winter. But where this series takes place is on an ark, and by ark I mean a giant floating piece of land in the sky that is predominantly winter. So the setting fits, even if the cover doesn't fit. But this is the fourth book in the Mere Visitor series, and I have to remember back to the first book. So in this series we follow Ophelia, and in the first book she is living on a different ark. She has had proposals for marriage multiple times, or basically proposals to have a betrothal arranged, and every time she has turned them down. And finally there's another betrothal offered, and her mother says, "You're taking this one." So she ends up traveling to another ark where it is predominantly winter. And unlike her ark, where everybody is family, everyone's related, so everyone treats each other like family, this is an ark of family clans. And each family has a different type of magic. One can create illusions. One has basically an attacking ability. There's different types of magic in this world. Our main character, Ophelia, is a mere visitor. So she can travel from one mirror to another as long as she has been there and can see where she's going. And she's also a reader. So she wears gloves most of the time because if she touches anything with the skin of her hands, she can see the entire history of an object. She can see every person who touched it, and I believe she can feel like how the person felt while they were holding it and things like that. There's a lot of political intrigue in these books because there's a lot of politics, family politics, on this arc that she goes to. Honestly, this is one of those series that I don't even know who to recommend it to because it is so different from anything else that I've read. And yeah, I really enjoyed the series, but it's a hard one to decide who can you recommend it to. However, I am really looking forward to wrapping up the series. The third book was a little weird because we went to yet another arc, and we had pretty much all new characters. We knew Ophelia, we knew like one other character there who doesn't show up until late in the book, but everybody else was new. So this one, I believe, is going back to the arc that her betrothed lives on. So, curious to see how the series wraps up. All right, then the next book is also part of a series, and that is Shadow Black by Sebastian de Castell, which is the second book in the Spellslinger series. Now, I read Spellslinger years and years ago, and for some reason, actually I shouldn't say for some reason, I couldn't find the rest of the books in the series. I bought the first book at Barnes & Noble, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. Read the book, Really enjoyed it. Didn't love it, but really enjoyed it. And then I couldn't seem to find any of the other books in the series. And finally managed to find some of the books at Half Price Books. So I have all but one now. However, I reread Spellslinger a couple years ago, and I absolutely loved it. And I think the reason I didn't the first time is because this is a YA series, and I was kind of losing interest in YA at that time, but I'd heard good things about Sebastian de Castell, so I decided to give it a try. But I went into it kind of with the mindset of, well, if it's YA, there's going to be things in here I don't really enjoy, and so I was keeping my eye out for that, and not really paying attention to the story like I should have. So I didn't get out of it what I could have. And rereading it a couple years ago, I finally got to actually enjoy the story, because I knew I really hadn't come across anything I didn't care for. But I'd gone into it suspicious that I would. So yeah, I didn't enjoy it as much as I could have the first time around. Really enjoyed it the second time, and I need to continue the series. But for some reason, maybe because of all the other series I have going on, I keep putting it off. So that's the next one that I would like to get to. All right, now I have to put down the coffee because I have two books. Both of these are by the same author, and I want to get to one of these in the winter. I just don't know which one I want to prioritize yet. Like I do, but I don't. So the first one is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, and the second one is Empire of Ivory. And Spinning Silver is a standalone, but Empire of Ivory is the fourth book in the Temeraire series. I read the first book last year. I read the second and third books this year, and I've really been enjoying the series. So I really want to continue on with the Temeraire series, but Spinning Silver feels like a more wintry book. So it makes me want to prioritize this one for the winter. But at the same time, the books in the Temeraire series are, honestly to me, I've realized they're written a little bit more like a classic novel in just the writing style. And I really like the way they're written, but they're very much books that feel like they take their time. And you should take your time reading them. So those are the kind of books I tend to like to read more in the winter when I feel like I can just slow down and take my time. So I'm not sure which of these two I'm going to prioritize. But I do want to get to at least one of these. All right, the next we have Fools and Mortals by Bernard Cornwell. And I have several books by him on my shelf, but I have never read a single one. So this one follows Richard Shakespeare, who is the younger brother of William Shakespeare. And I don't know any more than that, but I know it's going to go into his life, and it says that he dreams of a glittering career in one of the London playhouses, a world dominated by his older brother. But he's a penniless actor making ends meet through a combination of a beautiful face, petty theft, and a silver tongue. So I'm sure it's going to go into how his brother's part in the acting world affects him, probably their relationship, things like that. I don't know much more than that, but I've been really curious to pick this book up. This is the first book I ever bought by him, which is why it's the one that I'm picking for the winter. It's not a huge book. It's 357 pages. But historical fiction, classics, those are some of the books I really like to read in the winter. And if nothing else... I don't know what all that was about. And if nothing else, I would really like to just finally get one of his books read. Alright, then the last one of the books that I own, because there are several books on this list that I don't own, I'm going to have to get them through my library. But that is The Girl Behind the Red Rope by Ted and Rochelle Decker. And this is a father-daughter writing duo. And from what I understand, the main character in this book is part of a cult. And the whole thing is they have this red rope up that shows the boundary of their cult's area. And nobody's allowed to cross the rope. Beyond that, I really don't know anything else about the story. However, I know I've heard a lot of people talking about that they like the premise of Ted Decker's books, but they don't enjoy reading them. But I've never read one of his books. I own this one, and I also own 3 that is just by him. And they both sound really good. so I'm hoping I enjoy them, but I don't know. However, with the bare trees and stuff on this cover, it very much looks like a winter book, so that's why I want to go ahead and get to it this winter. Okay, then like I said, the rest of the books on this list are ones that I do not own. But the first one is The Mystoic School of Musicraft. And this is the first book in a middle grade series. It is a fantasy. It says it's about a girl who is attending a boarding school to learn how to use music to perform magic. That's really all I know. But as someone who was very much into music while I was in school, I was very much a band geek, I enjoy books that have to do with music. So this is one I've been wanting to pick up for a while, so maybe this winter I will finally get to it. And the next one I'm hoping to get to is The Ice Swan by Janelle Zagilski. I'm guessing on how to pronounce that. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. But this one is set in 1917, beginning in Petrograd, Russia, during the Russian Revolution. And the main character, Svetlana, I don't know her last name, Svetlana Dalsky, flees from Russia and goes to Paris, which, from my understanding, is where a lot of the Russians who were in favor of the monarchy went. And there she meets a physician who helps her with an injury, and then realizing that there's some troubles, he proposes marriage to her as a way of helping her out and helping get her family out of debt. However, Paris ends up becoming just as dangerous as Russia with the Bolsheviks, so they flee to Scotland. And I don't know anything beyond that, but I've only read a little bit when it comes to the Russian Revolution, and then of course there's the movie Anastasia, but that's really all I know when it comes to that time period in Russia. So I'm really interested to read this book and get a little bit different perspective, because I'm pretty sure, Svetlana is one of the princesses in Russia. So kind of curious to get that perspective. And I feel like I've heard good things about Janelle's books. So hoping I can get to it, and also hoping I really enjoy it. Then the next one is a book/series that's been making its way around BookTube, and that is Color by J.J. Fisher. And like The Ice Swan, this cover just screams winter. Now, I don't know if this book is technically fantasy, if it's technically sci-fi, because I feel like I've heard it classified as fantasy, but it talks about taking place in a world after an apocalypse, basically. So I don't know if it's set in the future of our world, or if it's actually set in a fantasy world that has its own apocalypse. But I have heard a lot of really good things about the series, so I would like to try to get to this one this winter. Then another one is another middle grade, and this is The Winter King by Christine Cohen. This one I'm just going to have to read the description off of my computer because I can't remember what it's about anymore. So it says, a village trapped in winter, a tyrannical god, and a girl who would do anything to keep her family alive. Ever since Cora's father disappeared through the ice, whispers about her family's curse have grown increasingly louder. Desperate to help her mother and siblings survive another bleak season in the Winter King's frozen grasp, Cora begins to bend and even break the rules she has kept since she was a little girl. But when she discovers a secret that's much bigger than herself, she realizes too late that she has put herself and those she loves in even greater peril. So, I will be honest, I was drawn into the cover first, but it does sound like it could be a really good book. Then the next book is Wolf Soldier by James R. Hannibal, and this is a young adult Christian fantasy, and it sounds like it's set in a fantasy world, but it sounds like the world is kind of in a place that Israel was in during the time of like the books 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, that kind of era. So it says, the Knights of the Light Raider Order disappeared nearly 2 generations past. Now the Keladin have withdrawn behind their barriers, and the dragon lands of bordering Tenelithar are overrun with dark oppression. The people living in disobedience to the rescuer who freed them long ago. A shepherd boy, Connor Inarian, and 4 young initiates rekindle the fires of the Light Raider Order in the hope of striking out across the mountains into the Tenelithar to destroy a portal and stop an impending invasion. So, actually, I guess it could be the time of the prophets, like 2nd Kings and stuff, when we have a divided Israel. But it sounds similar to that. Like the shepherd boy makes me think of David, so that's why I think of like First Samuel. But it sounds kind of like that, where it's like you were rescued from somewhere, you should have been obedient, but you're being disobedient, and now there are problems coming because of that disobedience. So that's what it reminds me of. Obviously, the cover looks very wintry. It has dragons, so I'm very curious to give this one a try. All right, then the last book is the one nonfiction on this list, and that is The Dark Queens by Shelley Puhak. I'm guessing how to say that name. So it sounds like it's about two women who lived in Spain in the 6th century, so the 500s. And one of them, Brunhild, was a Spanish princess raised to be married off for the sake of alliance building. Her sister-in-law, Fredegund, started out as a lowly palace slave, and yet in the 6th century Merovingian Empire, where women were excluded from noble succession and royal politics was a blood sport, these two iron-willed strategists reigned over vast realms for decades, changing the face of Europe. So just like I like reading historical fiction and classics in the winter, it's also a good time to read some historical nonfiction. And this is about a time period in a country that I know nothing about. The fact that it says The Dark Queens and it has a dark cover makes me think of like the longer nights in winter. So it just feels like it would be a really good book to read during the winter season. All right, I think those are all of the books that I have on my December and winter TBR. And I'm going to give you guys control over one book on my winter TBR. So if there is one book in particular on my winter TBR that you would like me to get to, not my December TBR, but my winter TBR, that you would really like me to get to, please leave the title of that book down in the comments below. And whichever book has the most people wanting me to read it, that book will be my top priority for the winter months. The rest of them, I will get to them as I'm able to and as the mood strikes, but they are the ones I will be prioritizing after reading challenges and book clubs and things like that. That is all I have for you guys for today. Let me know if there are any Christmas books that you are specifically wanting to read this December, or if you have any that you would recommend, because my list of Christmas books is actually starting to get kind of short because I haven't added very many in more recent years. Also, let me know what is a book that you would most like to get to this winter. And other than that, I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I'll see you later.